Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about the delegation, a U.S. delegation comprising of the acting U.S. Ambassador, Mr. John Hoover, along with his coterie. They paid a visit to the Bunny Gala Secretariat and met with Mr. Imran Khan. We'll be talking about that in some detail. And President Rouhani also made a telephone call to Mr. Imran Khan, and that will be our second topic of discussion, what transpired in that conversation. Let's begin our conversation. Let's talk about it. First of all, I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me for this conversation today, first of all, we have Burhan Islam Saab with us, former ambassador, and Sheryar Khan, an academic. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Sir, how should this particular visit by the U.S. delegation to Bunny Gala be perceived? Do you think it is a welcome gesture by the U.S. in trying to understand what the new government that will be coming in, what's in their mind, getting to know sort of ice-breaking exercise?
Basically, getting to know staff. If you notice that before this acting ambassador, or CDA as we call, met, there already 10 other ambassadors called on Imran Khan. This gentleman must have waited for some time to get a signal from Washington, how and what should I do and say to the would-be Prime Minister of Pakistan after the elections. That's why he took about more than 10 days to arrange this call. I was wondering why this delay. Then somebody told me that most probably the American ambassador, David Hale, was on a trip to Washington, official business. So they would wait possibly for him to come and call on Imran Khan. And when he would come from Washington, of course, coming with solid messages which could be directly conveyed by him, it would be different meaning than at a lower level meeting would convey. So that is why it is, I think, an introduction of a sort, although this gentleman was not an ambassador. But he must have conveyed some messages of goodwill, as we have seen. Imran said that trust-based relationship, what we need. There is a lot of mistrust, and a relationship is what he wants to transform the relationship.
That seems to be the theme when it comes to foreign relations. Where mostly, Mr. Imran Khan has also said that we're at step one, or place one with India, vis-a-vis India, and if they take a step towards us, we'll take 2 steps towards them, and that sort of
messaging.
Absolutely, sir. Similarly, with the U.S., the conversation, as we are always bound to say, is revolved around Pakistan-U.S. Bilateral relations, and matters of mutual interest were obviously discussed in that meeting. Let's talk about Mr. Imran Khan's perception of Afghanistan, and especially with the US, it's a very important subject. Pakistan wants to see peace in Afghanistan, according to Mr. Imran Khan. And now that we're seeing in the US, there's a realization of a political solution to be the only viable option in the Afghan conflict. And Khan Saab also showed his pleasure at this appreciation or this realization in some quarters in Washington that the only way out is for a political solution, and no military solution can do justice to the Afghan quagmire. So what's your comment on that, sir?
Well, Waqas, everybody knows this now, that yes, peace, everybody wants peace in Afghanistan, but it's not going to be achieved pretty soon. The situation in Afghanistan on the ground has changed very swiftly. Taliban have taken over swaths of territories, and the Afghan government itself is unable on its own to control the rise of the Taliban. United States in itself, it has some other ambitions maybe too in the region. It's going to stay there in that country because it has some other regional goals regarding this whole region with the rise of China and for Central Asia. So United States will stay there as well, and they need some kind of justification to sell that their stay in Afghanistan. So they will stay there as well. So achieving peace or wanting peace is more rhetorical than actually happening. This is, of course, can benefit Pakistan if there is a peace. But it's good for Afghans as well. But will it be good for other players? I don't think so. The big players who are there, they agree with us on this, and they have their own priorities. With the new administration in Islamabad, then Prime Minister in waiting Imran Khan, when he will take, or he has of course a vision for Afghanistan and for the region. Every leader would have a vision, and we've seen in the past that different leaders had a vision. But Pakistan is not the only player there. We cannot impact so much change in the region. We do not influence events. We do not influence or cannot influence so much in Afghanistan. For instance, in Afghanistan, how much money we are putting in there in Afghanistan government. So how much influence can we have on the government there? But there are countries, for instance, United States and India, they're putting in so much dollars there. They're bankrolling their governments there, the media and everything. So they have more influence there, and they can shape things there. Maybe they are in a better position. So expecting everything from Pakistan, or Pakistan playing a very big role there, I think it's exaggeration. We would not be. So let's face the reality that what role can we play there, and what should be our priorities, the priorities of our government. We can have some visions, but I think for foreign policy, you should always have a rationalist approach, that what you can achieve and actually do as a country, and what should be your priorities. For instance, the first priority for any government at the moment is to bring in political stability in this country, and along with it economic stability. As long as you are not economically stable, you are dependent on other countries or for your survival, so probably you would be in a position to have a great impact in your foreign policy. In that way, if you change your focus towards domestic issues and kind of try to achieve neutrality in some places. For instance, there are rivalries going on now. United States and China, Iran and Saudi Arabia, then Iran and United States, Russia and United States. So there are so many rivalries going on there, and they're pushing you to
India and Israel.
India,
Israel. Those.
So they're pushing you to join one side or the other, which can be very costly for Pakistan. The challenge for Pakistan is to not take a side. Because if you take a side, then there will be repercussions.
But all policies need to be devised in terms of national interest.
Of course.
And that is the main guiding principle. So I'm sure the PTI government is very much focused on that. And there have been many ups and downs in the US relationship with Pakistan. That was another observation that Mr. Imran Khan made. Now, how do you think, sir, can these ups and downs really be addressed? Because in the 70-year or more partnership that we've had with the United States, it's always been a carrot and stick sort of relationship. How can we move beyond that rationale and actually cooperate for mutual benefit, as they say, because we feel that the benefit is skewed in favor of the other party?
It will be a big challenge for the new government, no doubt about it, because our relationship with the US have been basically transactional relationship. They have been offering military aid and assistance, economic support, and we have been providing help to them when they need it. During the Cold War, one sort of support that we gave in the context of possible communist influence in the region. Then we got military aid and assistance, economic aid and assistance. Later, during the Afghan war, we again provided big support to them, acting as a conduit for their supply and assistance, whatever military action they needed, and the Mujahideen encouraging them, guiding them, helping them. So they gave you military support and assistance. So it was a transactional relationship. Now, to make it a meaningful one, as my colleague also referred, that it has to be a respectable relationship. If one side is so dependent on help from the other side, you cannot expect it to be a dignified, respectable relationship. Other side will expect you to do more, and you try to do whatever is possible within your means and capacity.
Constraints as well.
Constraints. So you can't do beyond a certain point. So that's why talking about new relationship, new element, new life in the relationship sounds difficult. Because you are, one of the statements that you have seen of the Minister for Finance, saying that we will be needing about $12 billion minimum dollars from IMF. So when you talk of IMF, we have seen 2 weeks ago the statement of US Secretary of State George Pompeo saying that we will not allow this aid to go to repay the Chinese loans that Pakistan is taking in the context of CPEC. So this is the sensitivity in the relationship. So best as to answer your question is to be independent. Don't be dependent on military assistance. Don't seek too much of economic support from the United States. You will get the respect. They will give whatever is due without going to, pushing you too much to a direction that is not of in your interest and that may not look dignified. So stop, and you expect in the process that they don't ask you to do more. It is possible only when you say no more to your aid and assistance also.
Yes, sir. That's a really tall order. One of the things that came out in that conversation that has been reported by the press, sir, is that the reason for the US-Pakistan disbalance in the relationship is because of a lack of trust on both sides, and that trust deficit needs to be removed. PTI wants to establish a trust-based relationship with the US and remove misunderstandings. That's the overall feeling that we have been given from that meeting. So do you think that there can be some policy decisions that are made that can achieve the goal that the PTI wants to achieve in terms of the US-Pakistan relationship of removing the trust deficit and misunderstandings?
Well, you know, the trust deficit is always there with any country. With any country you have a relationship, you would have some kind of a trust deficit. You can never trust another country fully, that this country would not look after its own interest and it would look after your interest. Every country in relationship with you would always prioritize their own national interest. So there you cannot trust any country in that regard. And it's so with the United States. What United States wants from us may not be in our national interest. And from there we have this trust deficit because they are not sure, or we are not sure what the United States wants in Afghanistan, what it wants, what are its intentions from us, and the same goes for the United States. This trust deficit can only be bridged if we are somehow on the same page on achieving this, the clear goals in Afghanistan, which at the moment are not. We don't know for sure how long the United States is going to stay here and what are its ultimate objectives. For instance, sometimes there is even a kind of concern within Pakistani quarter that the United States may even destabilize Pakistan if it wants. So we have this level of mistrust. And we came here to this level of mistrust because at the highest level our delegations, our diplomacy, it suffered. And we don't talk much, and we rely much on the public diplomacy, on Twitter diplomacy, and we see statements coming from the United States which are not received well here in Pakistan. So to achieve that trust, I think that this is going to be, we should never, realistically speaking, should never think of filling the trust deficit. Rather, what we should think is to be clear about our own foreign policy, what we want to achieve, and to understand what the United States wants to achieve, and then identify the areas where we can cooperate. Realistically speaking, we can cooperate with them, which is mutually beneficial to Pakistan as well as the United States. And this is how countries work. You can never agree to all the policy goals of another country. Even with China, we have very good relationship, but we cannot agree on everything with China. We have always to look into the point of convergence only. So for PTI at the moment, they have not formed a government right now, and this is what they wish to do. It's more rhetorical and political right now. When they assume office and when they see the constraints of their office and when they see the situation, the domestic political and economic situation of the country, they taste the reality of the government, then they would be in a position to talk to the United States and formulate their foreign policy. Right now they're talking from outside. So when they are inside, then things will change for them, and then I expect that this time around they should really look into all their foreign policy goals that they have, whether they are aligned to your national goals or not, to do the cost and benefit analysis, whether going into a relationship will be beneficial for the country or not. I'm not talking about the government. In most cases, we see if it will be beneficial to the government, and if you just save the regime, probably then it's not good for the people. Look at our transactional relationship with the United States in the past. Has it helped Pakistan, or we're paying more than what we have got? So this is a kind of cost and benefit analysis that you should do in your foreign policy, and it should be not based on some kind of a moral code or ideological thing, because this is not how it works.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that is often spoken about in these international circles is the sharing of core values. And when we talk about the sharing of core values, of course, I think all human beings do essentially share the same core values. And that is that we would like to have a peaceful neighborhood. We would like to live in a peaceful world. Moving on, the PTI also considers economic and bilateral relations with the US as extremely important. And at the same time, we also feel that China is our iron brother, and we also have very close relationships with Iran. And that might be a problem for the US if you see what's happening between the US and Iran these days, and especially what's happening with the US and China these days. So Pakistan is going to find itself in a very tight spot, trying to balance our relationship with countries that are antagonistic towards each other. But Pakistan does not have any, is not taking sides in any of the case, and is completely neutral, as they say. How are we going to be able to achieve this complete neutrality and take ourselves out of that equation where both countries will, sort of vie for Pakistan's influence, sir?
Good question, I must say. Basically, every country has to pursue its own interest. You have to see what is there in your national interest. As you said, regional peace, prosperity, development, peaceful environment for your people to prosper, and to have good relations with your neighbors, distant neighbors. And within that, you prioritize what is number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I always believe that your immediate neighbors should be your first priority. We must build bridges, build relations, keeping in view our own respective national interests with Afghanistan, with Iran, with Turkey, try to see what can be done with Iran, as India, and of course China and other countries. So we should see what is in our interest, as we say, the broader priorities that the new government and the country should set. And in Afghanistan, of course, we want peace. Peace in Afghanistan is as important for us as for the Afghan people.
Absolutely.
We will be more one of the real beneficiary than Afghan people, or immediately after Afghan people, if peace returns in Afghanistan. Now, there's a limit to what we can do. People expect Pakistan to, from American perspective, you talk to them, they will say, oh, push the Taliban, remove them from your country, whoever their families or whatever connections they have here at the base, they call it, remove them, and they will be prepared if you force them to come to the negotiating table, and then we'll dictate the term that suits us. Now, it doesn't suit Pakistan's interest. Pakistan's interest is that Afghans will be there always. They have been there for ages, centuries, and all along the history we were together as neighbors. Now, for the American interest, now we start talking about these, despite sacrificing so much, doing so much last 5-10 years, military operations, killing sometimes your own people who have taken arms against the government, whom we call terrorists. We have done it. We have cleared all the terrorists from our territories, but Americans ask you to do more. When we tell them to look, we are looking for the people who target our own within Pakistan. They take shelter in Afghanistan. We want to reach them. We request the Afghan government. We don't find cooperation. And then we have suggested some vital things which is in our interest. The border fencing, it should be strict and permanent. Then the Afghan refugees, these are in our interest, but these are secondary priority for them. I mean, if you talk about fencing the border, oh, you know, it's historically it has been an open border, and now all of a sudden, how can you do it? You know, the Afghan people, as I mentioned earlier, also possibly in your program, that even the Taliban had problem when you spoke about, you know, controlling the border.
Sir.
We thought that we have best of the relations with the Taliban. They did it. So under the circumstances, we'll put on the table what we have in mind. I think major policy changes not possible. If anybody expects Imran Khan will do some wonders, not possible. Whatever the national interest, Foreign Office will put on the table, Imran will have to decide. You remember one of the things Imran opposed was the drone strike. Now we have to see what Imran says. Drones continues to be part of American policy tool, objectives they do. Will Imran straight away tell them, please stop it immediately? And actually, when he comes to the Foreign Office will brief him saying that
Things look
how
very different
important-
from the desk, from
Different.
behind the desk, as Mr. Donald Trump found out.
They will tell how important it is. Yes, it happens. They will say that, look, drone is important because some of the targets that in Afghanistan or in our borders are as serious
Or
a
targeting,
target for us.
yeah, who are targeting Pakistan, of course,
Targeting
then
Pakistan.
you know, those strikes would obviously be welcomed by
Welcome.
by
So
Pakistan.
drone has to be there on the table.
Of course,
as
sir,
an option.
there are many complicated issues that will have to be dealt with the new incoming government. But while we're on the subject, let's also talk about the fact that there have been a number of world leaders who have congratulated or called Mr. Imran Khan and congratulated him themselves. And among those is also the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Mr. Hassan Rouhani. He telephoned Mr. Imran Khan, chairman Tehreek-e-Insaf, and invited him to visit Tehran. He also spoke about improving Pakistan-Iran's bilateral relations, especially trade. And now that we look at it in the perspective of the US sanctions that are now coming into play against Iran, how is Pakistan going to be able to balance that relationship is going to be the million-dollar question here, sir. Can you shed some light? What are your opinions on this?
Well, you're right that it's a million-dollar question, but for Iran, to contact Pakistan or the PM in waiting, it can achieve something diplomatically or politically. Iran is being isolated by the United States, and especially after the sanctions. Even European Union did not agree with the new sanctions or, with
As
the
a matter of
scraping
fact,
up.
sir, the European Union delegation also went and called on Mr. Imran Khan just a day or two before.
Even the US
And they
acting ambassador.
And they stated that they would help Pakistan in terms of getting off the FATF grey list, and there's an FATF delegation that's also expected here anytime soon. And not only that, but vis-a-vis doing business with Iran was another concern. That
Yeah.
in terms of the Iran gas pipeline, Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline, they said that they have no objections for Pakistan going ahead. But of course, with the US sanctions, and everything gets complicated. And it's not the same level playing field that Pakistan has to operate in. How are we going to deal with that, sir?
Well, first of all, Pakistan and Iran have no, significant trade already.
Right.
So we're not going to be affected that much. Unfortunately, if you look at our trade with a lot of Muslim countries, which we say they are brotherly Muslim countries, we don't have much trade with them. And even if there is a trade, so it's just an import of energy. With Iran, we may not circumvent right now the sanctions, but we have to look for other players as well in the region. For instance, China and Russia, how they react and how are they getting around these sanctions, and how China and Russia can provide an alternative mechanism of trade with Iran. Of course, Iran have withstood sanctions in the past, but with a huge cost, domestic cost, because you can see rampant poverty there, people, rising up against the regime. But the regime had enough resources and trade that it could sustain itself. This is ultimately what the United States wants, that the people rising up against the regime and the implosion of Iranian regime there within the government. This is what they want to achieve. Iran may withstand that, and Iran may find a ways of trade with the countries, but with Pakistan, we already we cannot at the moment antagonize the United States, which has sanctions, but we can always look up to China. And China would always, it already had a waivership with Iran. Russia also has a waivership.
So does India.
So does India.
India has been buying Iranian oil for years.
For years. So they have alternative mechanisms. And if Pakistan becomes part of that whole mechanism, then we can avoid it. But are we able to trade with them, and what to trade with them? Is it only the import of energy, which we are already importing? Or our domestic industry is so competent that we can export stuff to Iran and get some foreign exchange reserves, improve that. Can we do that? I don't see we are in that position right now, because our economy is in shambles, and we were talking about going to IMF and to other countries to give us loans. So probably that's what the real situation is. And on the other hand, Iran wants to avoid that isolation. Pakistan is important for Iran as well, because in the past, the relationship between Pakistan and Iran got frayed because of that proxy war going on within Pakistan, which was the proxy war of Saudi Arabia and Iran. And that's, again, they have taken positions. They want us to be part of, especially Saudi Arabia wants to be part of us. And Iran is worried that we should not be part of this war and be used against Iran. So Iran wants to befriend us, to come close to us. And I think the more wise strategy for Pakistan would be to remain neutral in this and not be part of this rivalry, because you have to do, will it help us in the long run?
Well,
maybe.
Another thing that has come out from the conversation from PTI is that they would also willingly like to play a role in some kind of a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. They would like to play the role of a mediator and end this conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, whatever it is.
I don't think so. It's more rhetorical. If you look at the history...
Well, Pakistan did play a very major role to bridge the differences between China and the US. So we played a major role in mediating. If we could mediate between the US as giant superpower and China, then why not Iran and Saudi Arabia?
We did not mediate in that sense. We provided an opportunity for them to meet.
Which is pretty much the same thing.
But here, they have not asked us to play the role. We don't have that economic might which makes, which takes us into a position where we can play a mediatory role. They are not ready to accept as, as a mediator. We are rather, our economy is rather dependent, let's say, on different, bailouts and, from the friends. So we are not in a position to be an effective mediator. Yes, of course, we can go and talk to Iran, we can go and talk to Saudi Arabia, but can we make an impact? And especially when the United States itself has put sanctions on Iran, it's siding with Saudi Arabia. So how can you bridge that? And what can we offer? What are the common grounds on which we can bring them? So it's a big game, and I think Pakistan is not in a position to play in this big game. We have to be realistic and rationalistic, and not be idealistic that we can do something. Yeah, probably it can be a facade for us to remain neutral. It's a good political or diplomatic strategy. I appreciate it there, that we know our limitations, we know our constraints. But to be neutral, we need to pose as mediators. So I appreciate it.
But I think that in terms of Pakistan's stated neutrality, national interest can be the most important card that can be played, in that sense that our national interest does not allow us to take any sides, and we have to stay neutral. Sir, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I will also like to cover a little bit the previous topic that we were discussing.
Please.
With Iran, I see a lot of positivity now. First time in many years, you have change in Pakistan. I think Iranians are also reading that people in Pakistan want change. They want balanced, respectable relationship with the countries of the region. And this Imran Khan is somebody possibly will talk of something new, even on foreign relations. So they are having a lot of expectations from Imran Khan. And I see also a lot of positive signals across, flowing right, left with Iran. And US-Pakistan-Iran relations in the past didn't flourish, I should say, we are under a tremendous pressure from the Americans. We would even go 2 steps when Americans don't tell you directly that, look, you are violating, when talking about the gas and oil pipeline. Our people would be so scared talking about that and talking to the Americans about what are the possibilities. They would not initiate a proposal to talk to the Americans and tell them forcibly, look, that our economy is in such a situation, we must open relations with Iran. I mean, your sanctions we appreciate, but because of your sanctions, we should not, our normal relations with Iran should not hamper. Our people would not initiate. For example, we suggested that for the import of oil, for the gas pipeline, let us talk to the Iranians. Iranians said that, look, you have violated the bilateral agreement that we signed 8 years ago. We have done our requirement of laying pipeline up to the border. Now it's you have to do it. If you don't do it under the agreement, you have to pay compensation to us. It will be big loss to you, so we are going to, if you don't do it, we will go for international arbitration. Our people would say that, look, American sanctions, we cannot move beyond this. I mean, I was also dealing for a while this issue. So I suggested, and our department suggested, that why not to talk to the Americans in a firm voice, with strictly saying that this is something that we have waited for a long time. Your sanction goes on indefinitely. We can't follow your whatever the dreams that you have to achieve out of Iran by sanctions. But we are suffering. I think we should go for this pipeline thing. This is spoiling our relations with Iran, because our relations with Iran is as important, being a regional country, as whatever the dynamics that you are thinking of. So we should go for it. They came back saying that, well, look, sanctions are in place, it could harm you. Now, I would suggest that don't go by their threats, it could harm you. Let's take the initiative and see what harm they could cause. Now, did you see? Possibly in that context, Americans are saying, the European Union, that on gas pipeline issue will help you. Remember?
Yes, sir.
So this is a great message that I read. You mentioned about it. We should talk to the European Union also, that you are also avoiding the lines drawn by the Americans you are not following vis-a-vis Iran. We will also have to do it now. We are faced against the wall. Please help us. We should open negotiation with the European Union, tell them that we want to do this pipeline project. You tell how you can help us. Put pressure on the Americans. Financial issues coming, let's jointly talk to the Americans that you can't do. It is in your interest, but a country, Pakistan, has come to the bottom rock in terms of its economic situation. It needs assistance. 10 billion we don't have. We can't pay our cost for the imports for more than 6 months. A country, a nuclear power we claim, we can't be in that situation. We should talk to the European Union. It's a good offer. They must have thought about it, that for Pakistan it's an important issue. Let's put it on the table. They are very clever. I also like that offer of theirs, that on FATF also we will help you. So let's talk to the European Union. They are not in good, I don't say they are in collision course with the Americans, but at least they have also problems on these sort of issues, Iran and all. I think we should talk, exchange note.
Absolutely, sir.
And make a common table or position so that we can talk to the Americans, keeping our main talking points on the same.
Absolutely, sir. And another very important aspect to this entire conversation is the trade war that is now going on between the US and several other countries. That includes China, that includes the European Union, it even includes Canada. And Mexico. It's a difficult time for all the countries dealing with the US.
But take a stand and let's move forward in coordination with others.
Well, most importantly, sir, the CPEC is a flagship project of Pakistan, and we've stated our support to it in not any wavering terms. So that there is one opportunity that can be, or a threat that can be turned into an opportunity by inviting or convincing the Americans to actually enter into a business venture with CPEC, become investors in CPEC, and have become stakeholders in the project, so that they can also benefit from the long-term dividends that CPEC has to offer, sir.
I must tell you that it is very difficult.
Yes, sir.
This same idea I tried to broach when I was dealing with the subject. Chinese are very sensitive about it. I can't go beyond a point, but I think we can't bring in other parties to get and play some role. Although I was saying that not directly CPEC, but any economic project they want to do parallel, why not to invite the Americans? Our government is very sensitive about it because our special relations with China. I think we can't make progress on that.
All right, sir. But still, moving forward, Sheryar Saab, what options do you see the government has on the table to balance the precarious situation that we have with almost every country around?
Well, right now, I think the past decision that we took, our different governments took by establishing relationship with different countries, I think they are going to affect us, and we cannot come out of it easily. So there was a time that we could balance United States and China, but this was a time when we were needed by the United States. Today, United States is very much worried about the presence of China in Pakistan, its investment in Pakistan, and China itself is very much worried about United States' role in Pakistan. It would want United States' role diminish in this region. This is the kind of rivalry that we are kind of sandwiched in it. And we have made clear now that we are tilting towards China since we have past good relationship we have done with CPEC with them.
But China is our immediate neighbor. I mean, how can we not?
But there is a rivalry between China and United States.
There's a rivalry between every other country and the United States at the moment,
yes,
sir.
And that's what I said earlier, that for Pakistan, I think the priority at the moment would be to keep that neutrality, to be not part of any, to not take sides, because when you take sides...
But when somebody comes and tells you that either you're with us or against us, then what option do you have left,
there should be a third option.
Well,
there should be.
What is it?
For instance, when Turkey was asked the same question, Erdogan said that I have a parliament in place. I'm going to ask my parliament if it's possible or not. And he went there and he asked the parliament, and parliament said, no, they cannot attack Iraq from our land. And because it was the decision taken by a parliament, so it was a democratic decision, and United States could not put any more pressure on it because it was a democratic decision. If we remember, in the United States, it also has a kind of a weakness if you come with democratic credential, because the United States believes only democratic governments are legitimate governments. And when you take cover of democracy or parliament, then probably you can get away with it. So there are countries in the world, they have remained neutral despite all the pressures that you should take side this way or that way. At least your economy should have some kind of sustainability. Not every country is independent. I don't say Pakistan can become economically independent. No country is economically interdependent. We are interdependent, all of us. But there is asymmetry of interdependence. Yes. In some ways, there is more power to the countries on which you rely more. So there is asymmetry of dependence.
And isn't that what the American trade war is all about?
Yes,
to deal with the asymmetry that they feel is against them.
Yeah,
and I think that by extension should also be shared with the fact that every single country on the planet has its own national interest to cater to, and I think that should be kept in perspective. Yes. Well, thank you very much, sir, for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. You heard the conversation, and as always, we like to say that please draw your own conclusions from what you've heard. And we hope and we pray that Pakistan is able to chart a course that is best for our national interest. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.